You have any comments or questions before we get ready to close our class? Anything you'd like to share about Aquila and Priscilla or teamwork in general?
I think it's interesting that in verse 26, when they were, or maybe it's not 26, yeah, verse 26, whenever they were, they listened to Apollos, but the first thing that they did wasn't point out that he wasn't telling the whole message. They first invited him to their house to serve him.
Yeah.
And then that came up in conversation. I think that's a good evangelical tactic.
Yeah.
That's just kind of small in there.
Yeah, and that's sometimes what we want to do is immediately point out our differences. And when we do that, we're automatically creating friction. We're automatically setting a tone of you think this and I think this, and we're butting heads. But that's not what they do. They pull him aside, they bring him in, and they share something in common with him and encourage him in things that they do have right and then teach him more accurately those things. Yeah, good point. What else? The picture on the screen is supposed to be representing that Aquila and Priscilla teaching Apollos there. And I noticed that when I sent that PowerPoint last night, it looks like Aquila's getting ready to beat him with that scroll. I don't think that's what that's supposed to be. I don't think that's how they taught him, is by beating him over the head with it, but it kind of does look like that and all those things. I think about teamwork, and ultimately teamwork is accomplished by not giving up, right? Because everything's not going to be perfect. We're not always going to work together perfect, but we overcome those obstacles. That's where Aquila and Priscilla started. Overcoming adversity, remembering the mission, and then practicing those things together. We're not always going to see eye to eye, but we don't ever give up. And you can read all sorts of inspirational stories about people who didn't give up. There are stories of people. I was reading some about a guy that was hit by a car when he was 3 years old. Broke almost every limb in his body. When he got to the hospital, they said he's not even going to live. And he does survive. So many surgeries, he lives. He goes on to be an athlete and runs a half mile in under 2 minutes. After being a person who said you're not even going to live because of this car accident. There are Olympic champions that battled polio when they were younger and couldn't even walk, and then regained their strength in order to win the high jump in the race, and all those sort of things about people who I'm facing something, and it's easy for me to say I'm going to give up and I'm going to quit. But they didn't. They kept fighting. They kept overcoming, and they looked at the mission as being worth it. They look at the end goal as being worth it. And that's something that we've got to think about in our congregation, in our church. I don't always agree with you on everything. And you and I, we may not get along perfectly on things. Although we try, we love one another, we care for one another. But we're people that have different opinions sometimes. But is the goal of growing the church worth it? Is the goal of getting to heaven worth it? Is the goal of reaching lost souls worth it? I most certainly think that's worth putting aside our differences in opinions on some things. Not saying aside we jeopardize the truth. I'm not saying that. But on small things, right, let's look over those in order to think about the big mission, right, of working together for the Lord, serving Him, and helping teamwork make the dream work. Right? Anything else you'd like to share before we close in prayer? All right, let's pray together.